Okay, this emergency action plan, which was introduced last year, and each one of your departments, I am sure of, has in your written policy, has your individual plan for your building or your workplace. It doesn't require a whole lot of training other than to know that you have a written policy in place. You can look at it anytime you want. You need to know where those written policies are kept in your department. And it is an individual, because it's specific to your building. Obviously, you have to take a look at yours to know. This is more of a general view of what they all look like. Just some housekeeping here, and who's doing all this. In each one of your plans, you have emergency contacts. I think it's relatively easy these days to know what to call in the event of emergency. If all else fails, call 911, okay? Certainly if it's not a particular emergency, some of these other numbers that follow or would come after 911. If you have an emergency, that's where you start. Things start to calm down. You want to be calling Ed to let him know that his building burned down, or you need to call Deb Cabana to let her know the same. So these are all numbers that you can call that are more informative after the emergency.
That's Stevie's old cell.
That's his old cell. That's right. You're right. Okay. Should we put on the signboards outside your new cell?
I've been giving him a
Yeah, I'll give you the number.
Yeah, I bet you will. Yeah. Okay. We know where that's going to go. Different types of alarms, and how do we let people know we're having an emergency in our building or in our facility? We've got the good old yell for help, which is a direct voice contact, or it may be one of your fellow workers say, call 911. Then, of course, you've got here in this particular building and some of the other buildings, you've got a telephone that has an intercom, and we'll get to this in a few minutes. But you can always pick that up, hit intercom, and you're going to get basically a loudspeaker type announcement. So you evacuate the building, lockdown. We'll get into those in a few minutes. The good old fail-safe for any building, if there's an emergency, is the red pull stations. It says fire on them, but they're good for lots of other things, okay? They get people's attention, and when you hear the fire alarm, you evacuate the building. So in any particular emergency, and today in 2014, there are certainly a lot more emergencies in the workplace you have to think about than fire, and we'll get into some of that in a few minutes. All part of the new, I say new, it's really not new, but for us it is in gray, of any kind of plan for emergency in your building is we've been trying to create safe zones. One of your first safe zones is outside. So if you evacuate a building, there's no place safer than outside of a burning building. But if it happens to be another type of emergency, like a lockdown or a shooter or domestic or a chemical spill, the safest place may be in your building. In that case, you do not pull one of those alarms because that's telling people to get out. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. So safe zones can be away from the building where the problem is. You want to be clear of responding emergency. If you're having an emergency, then you're going to get emergency apparatus within a couple hours at least. We'll be here. If you want to stay clear of the building until you are directed to go back in. Oh, but by the way, that was a joke. Okay, I'm not serious. I don't want anyone quoting me on that one. It'll be a few minutes. Stay clear until you're instructed by emergency personnel to go back in the building, and the big deal is to take a head count. If you've evacuated your building, your program director of your building that is named in your policy needs to take a head count. We need to know if everyone is out safely. Head counts are difficult. They're difficult for us to know who to go to find out who the head count is. We do it with the school all the time. Usually in the school evacuations, you will see in the driveway by themselves usually the person that's responsible for that. The rest of the people have gone somewhere else. They can tell you that's the one you go to. In this case here, it would be well, we'll get to the evacuation of where you're going to be, but you look for that person that says, there's 8 employees here today and they're all here. Or there was 8 and we only have 7, somebody's missing. They could be out for the day on vacation, but we need to know, obviously, that you've accounted for everyone. So they also, your safe zones can also be inside the building, and particularly here in this building, we have identified a couple of safe zones. It's usually a room that has a lock on it so that you can go in and lock yourself in. It's usually a room with no windows, preferably, so that the bad guys outside can't see in the window. In schools now, a lot of the plan is to pull a shade on all the classroom windows as they lock so they can't see in, and preferably some kind of a solid door. Most of these doors are 2-inch fire doors, which are great. But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves as to why you would go into one of these safe zones. Now, not all of your buildings have safe zones. I can see you all now thinking, where's my safe zone? We do not have, in all your buildings, a place to go. The maintenance building, there's not a lot of places to hide. And there are others, but we're working on that. Again, your interior safe zones are places that you can get inside, stay inside from severe weather potentially. Yesterday, you turn on the TV and you see these terrible tornadoes. Those people need a safe zone, and they don't need to be outside, they need to be inside. Maybe not so bad for us here in Maine on severe weather. However, you may have an act of violence in the parking lot. You may have a disturbance on the ball field. You're out, no, I'm not, I'm safe. And I'm exaggerating a little bit, but your potential violence could be outside. You want to be inside. Again, the interior ones are mostly for the employees who maybe I'm going to use the administration at the counter, for instance, where there's 4 or 5 ladies that encounter some kind of a disturbance, or things escalate with a customer that John has overtaxed, and they get ugly about it. They come in, they take it out on the girls, and things get out of hand. Where do you go? You don't want to go out the door and past that person. You want to go to a safe zone. So they have a safe zone for that. A couple of different indications. Remember we talked about you got on the phone in the building and you alerted people to an emergency? So code red. Now code red is used for a reason. Red is always associated with those alarms which mean get out of the building. Evacuate. So red is always associated with an evacuation plan, okay? You can communicate that again with the alarm. That's a code red. You can get on the telephone. You could simply voice it to your fellow employees. There's a fire in the building. Get out, okay? I would hope that you could find one of those, but you can always yell it in maintenance department. There's 3 of you, 4 of you, whatever, you just yell it, get out. Code red could include these things: a fire, which is the most obvious, could be a bomb threat. Schools have them often. Could happen here. Chemical spill. Threats that we just talked about, where the public's in here and somebody just kind of loses it, or it's a council meeting where somebody gets a little excited and starts threatening people. Certainly weapons in the building. You see somebody that comes up the sidewalk, and obviously they've got a gun strapped to their belt. That is a threat entering your building. So you have 2 choices. You either lock down before he gets in, or you evacuate after he gets in. So code blue is the other one. We have 2 in this building, or 2 in the town of Gray, red and blue. Red is get out, blue is stay. The school has 3. They have a white. Okay, well, we don't need to go into that. So code blue, of course, is a place where you want to find one of those safe zones, whether it's public safety or public works even. You can go in the bathrooms, usually are great ones. They don't usually have exterior windows. The thing about a safe zone is you need to have a lock on the door. If that, Ed's been in the process of doing that in the last year, putting deadbolts in some of these places where you can go in, lock yourself in and stay there until help arrives. Certainly, in a code blue, you want to be quiet. So it's not one of those deals where you go into the room and you start yelling for help. You want to be quiet. You want to be a library type thing here. Go in, shut the door, and just wait till the appropriate people tell you to come out. Some of the emergencies that we deal with, obviously tops of the list is a medical emergency, and that can be you, your fellow employee, or it can be the public. And I would sooner say you're going to in places like the transfer station or here, where a lot of public comes in and out, that's probably where your medical emergency is going to be. We have people walk to our door with medical emergencies, obviously because they know who we are, but you're going to get someday somebody walks in to the transfer station. It's happened, you know, I have chest pain, you know, I cut myself, or I'm not feeling well, or that type of thing. You're going to get it. That is a medical emergency that requires 911. Do not call the fire station 657-3931. That will potentially not have anyone answer the phone. We are not always there at the phone, and that is not what you do for an emergency. 911 will get a hold of us quicker than you can, okay? We still have people in the town of Gray who call our private line to ask for the rescue, or a fire even, still after 20-some-odd years of 911. So do not do that. 911. I don't care if you're down the street, across the parking lot in Public Works, you call 911. Stay with the patient, whoever it may be, and help direct us into the emergency so we know where to go. You may be on the ball field, you may be out in the transfer station. We need to know where in that facility you are. So put somebody at the gate, put somebody at the driveway. That can lead us in and show us exactly where you're at. Fire, the other obvious emergency. I think everyone's pretty on key with that. What you would say on the public address system is simply there's a fire emergency, evacuate immediately. You don't need to give details. You don't need to, you know, give the weather or the time of day. You need to evacuate right now. Threats, which is becoming more and more an issue for everyone, I think, whether it's the schools or the public buildings. And folks, it is going to happen someday in this public forum, whether it's at your department or this one, it's going to happen. That we're going to deal with a threatening public. It's going to happen, and we need to know how to deal with it. So I won't read all of this. You can scan down through it. I think we are all pretty versed at what a threat is, but I'll just simply say in a few words what a threat is. You become uncomfortable with the situation. That's a threat. It can be verbal, can be a mannerism, it can be a fist slamming down on the counter. You become uncomfortable with this person. That is a threat. That's time to ask for help. It is not time to try to diffuse the situation. There are methods to do that. You are not the professionals. Call for help, okay? Severe weather, again, you know, we kind of scoff and laugh at this because we happen to get pretty good notice. Even though we laugh about the weatherman, we normally here in the state of Maine know when there's a potential problem, whether it's thunderstorm, you know, a tornado alert, or a snowstorm. You know, we laugh about that, but we do get pretty good advance notice for that. And if you know, aren't sure of that, you know, Stevie obviously is the best choice for that. He's hand in hand with the National Weather Service, so we'll more than likely know that there's something potentially where you would have to lock down your building. Normally what happens here in the town, if we're having bad weather, we go home. That's really the best defense because we have time. No, you don't go home. You stay here. Hazardous material is something we need to talk about. You know, if you watched the news here about a month ago, there was a propane incident. You know, it was Gorham, Wyndham, somewhere anyway, that an ATV actually damaged an underground propane tank, believe it or not. A lot of our buildings do have propane. For example, right outside the town manager's door, she's setting on 30,000 gallons of propane. 30? 20? 60, well, there. So now you're, yeah. You, we may not find you for days. But all kidding aside, it's very dangerous. And the hazardous material may not originate in your building. It could be driving by on the street. Could be driving up Route 100, could be going up Shaker Road or the Turnpike. Or it could be down at the, on the flats where we have propane and we have other gasoline tanks and such down there. So hazardous material comes in lots of different forms. We're not going to have a class on hazmat today, but in your, what you need to know how to deal with is whether to lock down or evacuate. And that is where public safety will help you in the event that there is a trailer truck overturned here on Colley Hill at the corner. Depending on what it's hauling for hazardous, you may be evacuated, you may not. But that you could also be locked down for too. Those are the choices that your public safety will make for you, or the law enforcement. A little later on, the hazardous material will be addressed with, Ann is going to talk about the global harmonization, which takes the place basically of the MSDS that you're familiar with. Again, the offsite that I just spoke about, some of these trucks that carry hazardous waste have an evacuation zone of a half-mile radius. Half-mile. You know how big that is if you stand in Gray Corner and you go a half-mile around you? It's about 5,000 people. So you may be told to take a particular route. Okay, I live on Shaker Road, and the incidents on Shaker Road don't go Shaker Road. You may have to go somewhere else. But those are all things that hazardous waste could bring to this town. Talked about propane gas. That in itself is usually detected by smell. If there is a leak, you come in at 8:30, whoever opens up the town office, and that doesn't smell right. Out the door you go, okay? That is not something that you take a chance with, or any building. We had public safety, it happened to us. We had a leak. Out the door you go and call for help. Back to the out-of-control person. There are a few things you can do to diffuse the situation. However, do not try to be a policeman. Remain calm. Try to calm them down, but meanwhile, you're calling 911. We actually have a system in this building of panic alarms that we won't publicize too much, but there are alarms that the people here can James Bond style press underneath their desk and cops show up at the front door. We've been over that with the appropriate people. Don't become argumentative, which could be a problem for some of you. But really don't try to, customer's always right. And in a case like this, the threatening person is, yes, sir, okay, sir, how can I help you, sir, ma'am, do you need help? All of those things can diffuse the situation, but meantime, you've got some help coming. And the last thing you want to do is yell, call the cops. That does not de-escalate. That escalates the situation. If Ed is giving me a hard time and Wink yells, call the cops, he's just going to go to a new level. That's why the silent alarm, somebody walks out of the room, takes their cell phone, calls 911 while he is with that person. Don't escalate the situation by threatening to call the police. Terrorizing can also come face-to-face, verbal. It can come with the famous terrorizing is on the men's room wall where somebody wrote some graffiti. That is a threat. That is terrorizing the school, for instance. So it can come in different ways. It can come through the email. Not too long ago, I think you read in the news about New Gloucester's problem, where a citizen is threatening public officials through email. And that is also a federal offense, by the way, because you get the FCC involved. So it can come in different forms. So if you don't take it lightly, if you get an email or a phone call here at the town office or a threat, we come real close, with people calling about snowplows or fire trucks or whatever it might be they're complaining about. It comes real close to threatening, and we don't take that lightly. So we have reported such incidents before. So the phone can be used for that, to be threatened by. I mean, back to New Gloucester, they were actually putting, this particular person was putting things on their front lawn, posters on their front lawn threatening town officials. And that went on for a number of years, but when it took to emails and phone calls, that's when the police got involved, okay? So don't take it lightly. If you get that, report it. Active assaults, I think that a couple of years ago, we had a sheriff here that talked about that and how to deal with some of that. That's an ongoing thing now. We actually, some of us have attended classes for active shooters. What do you do in the schools now? All these things are changing almost on a daily basis. Every incident that happens in the country, in a school system or a public building or in a subway or in a Walmart, the officials go back to the drawing boards. How can we do this better? How can we prevent it, first of all? What do we do with all these children when it happens? You know, there's lots of schools of thought. But here again, for us, don't be a policeman, okay? Evacuate if you can. If you can't, you lock down. So back to the emergency action plan, which is what we're talking about. The important part is the training. You know, last year about the time that I was saying this, we had an alarm here, which obviously was a drill. We're not going to do that today. But you may find here in the next few months, the safety committee has talked about it, alarms in your buildings, you may get a surprise drill, okay, as part of the requirements that we need to do each year. I'm sure you were. What is a code red? You got a multiple choice, so don't answer yet. Is the code red somebody bleeding, go to interior, or evacuate the building? All right, C, evacuate the building. After you evacuate, what do you do? I'll help you. Stay there until the head count is taken and then leave. Stay there until the plant administrator tells you to leave. Get in your car and leave. And I'll bet you if the evacuation is 5 minutes to 4, a lot of you will get in your car and leave. Right? Stay there until the plant administrator, and the plant administrators, by the way, are identified in your policies. All inside assaults require code red evacuation. False. Because, why? Right. If, you know, depending on the building, if you have to go past the bad guy, obviously you don't want to do that. So you may not have an exit available. So you may be, in this case, finding a safe room. If the person passes out on the floor, you should step over them, kick them to the curb, look for a sheriff. Now I got to tell you, there's no sheriffs in this room, but that's the last thing you want to do. No, I'm just kidding. It's not the first thing you want to do. Ah, somebody was paying attention. Yay, Elizabeth. Do not call 3931. So you would call 911. If you encounter an out-of-control person in the workplace, you should. Before I give you choices, what do you do? Call Pam so she can lay them out right there, yeah. We have a clipboard that we use. That's another story. It's got sharp edges. Yeah, tell them to leave the building. What would that do? Keep a safe distance between you and them. That's not a bad idea, but argue with them. What's the best answer? Okay. For hazardous chemical release outside, you should go to an interior safe zone. You should evacuate. You should wait for instructions for police and fire personnel. C. Remember we talked about that, because you have choices, but you don't really know what the problem is or where the problem is, so you don't want to step into the problem. Stay put until you're given instructions. Threatening message written on the bathroom wall never requires an evacuation. Yeah, because think about it in the school, you know, I say all the time, it's a bit of an exaggeration, but it happens a lot. And 9 times out of 10, it's in the boys' room. I don't know why. Boys are bad. They just write stuff, you know. They're not as verbal as females are, so they write stuff. I guess that's my reason. Any questions on our evacuation plans and our emergency action plans? We have 6 minutes. We all good? Yes. Josh?
If you have a code red, isn't it just good common sense to have no one either start the car or get on a cell phone? Or should that only be in the event of you know you have a gas leak?
I'm not understanding.
At a previous place, I was told, if you were told to evacuate the building, tell everyone to stay off their cell phone and have no one go to their car and start it up in the event that there is a gas leak. Is that just,
Okay,
is that
so,
overprotective or what?
so you are talking about a gas leak and you're
Well, we don't
evacuating?
know. We were told evacuate.
Okay.
Should we try and discourage people from using cell phones or starting their car?
Certainly starting the car, well, I mean, you don't know what you're evacuating for potentially, and you shouldn't have to. If it's not a verbal thing and somebody just pulls this and you hear that, you don't know. If it's a fire, chemical release, workplace violence, you don't really know. It's always a good idea to stay off your cell phones, go to your meeting spot and stay there until you know. Now, what's the first thing that happens? I mean, I'll use school bus accidents. 50 kids on a bus have a rear-end collision where nobody's hurt. Parents can arrive before we do. And why is that? Cell phones, okay? It's on Facebook before we get there. That may be a bit of an exaggeration, but it's pretty close. Same thing can happen here, Josh. You all evacuate. You don't know why yet, so why are you on a cell phone? Why? What are you doing? What are you doing with that cell phone? There's no reason to be on that phone. Go where you're supposed to be and wait until you find out and you're given instructions. Certainly not starting a vehicle because, this parking lot is laid out right in front of the propane tank. So if there's a potential problem there, you don't want to be there. You want to be in your meeting place. Why? Head count. Okay, we need to know. Foremost is your safety. You don't care about the building. We want to know that everyone's out, are all safe. So, if that answers your question then, Marcel.
Say a tanker overturns in the middle of town. When will we, as departments or buildings, be notified that you stay there, you leave?
Right. In this particular case, because you're a public building, that's one of the first buildings that these folks will be coming around to tell you. If an evacuation is ordered for that, you will literally have to go door to door. And we would certainly come to the closest buildings and a public building. You would probably get notification from us either through the county police who would call here, or one of us would call direct, or we would send somebody in. If it's the end of Hancock Street, for instance, we're going to march somebody right down to your house and to your library, your home, and let you know. So different ways that can be handled. Any others? Yes.
Do we have a policy if a person off the street, citizen, came in and wanted refuge because maybe their ex-husband or somebody was following them and threatening them, and they want refuge because they're afraid they're going to do harm to that person?
Yeah, we do not cover that in our policy. That would certainly be a call to the police, and they would have to provide that refuge. We don't have any capability of doing that. I mean, other than temporarily, yes, we wouldn't kick them out the door, but I don't think that question's ever been asked, so it's a great question. No, we don't have, other than for weather-related things where people have to get out of their home, yes, we have shelters, but
The
no.
only reason I asked that is one Friday afternoon, there was a young couple, he pulled into the parking lot real quick and his girlfriend jumped out of the car and she wanted to get away from him. And he took off down the street. So I was outside washing windows and I said, if you need to make a phone call, if you need to get away from him, come to me and I'll get you inside the building.
Mhm.
We were locked down at the time because it was after 12 on a Friday. Well, he came, she said no, she didn't want any help. I stayed outside, and of course, he came back. And he pulled up and talked to her, and while he was there, I offered her refuge again at the same time, and she declined. And then from there on, I just monitored in case she decided to run to the building.
Right.
So I was just wondering if there was any policy that said we have to,
No.
what we got.
Would you call 911?
I certainly would. You know, I think that's one of those situations where your involvement, you have to quickly decide what your involvement's going to be. Is it going to be run away? Is it going to be get involved? You know, once you're involved, of course, you pick up that phone and you know, I'm going to call 911 for you. That could escalate the whole situation.
Yeah, well,
It certainly
I
would.
asked her if
Yeah.
she wanted assistance, I can
Yeah.
assist you in any way that you want. She says, no.
Yeah,
thank you."
or here you can use my phone if you'd like, yeah. No, we don't. So that actually happened here?
That actually happened here.
Okay, interesting. Dean?
Chief, just with the rec department again, we're outside, all our kids, staff are outside. Someone comes on grounds outside threatening, scatter, hide. I know we talked about this before, but
Yeah, two schools of thought now, you know, in the schools, like I said, they're constantly examining it, whether you scatter and run or you congregate and hide. Certainly if you're outside, I say go the opposite way and as orderly as you can. And try to do it before things get out of hand. I think that's the key with all of these things that we're talking about. You know, there is nothing to be said that you can't get these kids out of a harmful situation before it's harmful. And I mean somebody just yelling. Okay, somebody's yelling, this doesn't sound good to me, kids, come with me. Because if you wait, you know, it's too late. I don't know if that really answers your question, but when you're outside, in your particular case, whether it's at the beach or on a field trip or out here, you certainly have people that are in charge, supervisors, monitors, whatever you call them, and you just, you know, perhaps a code word for your staff, just, you know, a code word that does not alert the perpetrator, but it alerts your staff to say, okay, grab the kids and go somewhere, you know? Mickey Mouse. I mean, you can use anything for a code word, something that won't escalate the situation, but it tells your staff it's time to gather the chicks and protect them somewhere. So, yeah.
I was just thinking about Dawn's situation. It would seem to me that we would want to treat that the same way that we would if we were inside of our building and we became aware that there was potential danger. From my perspective, and certainly in this particular situation, I mean, it could be dramatic, it could be drama, and it could be that there is a real threat there. But for you, there's a potential of a real threat on you. It could be a setup. You know, I mean, where we're seeing where there's 2 or 3 people that are coming to a home and they're pretending one situation when it's something else. But if I think I'd rather be safe than sorry if it looks like there's a potential danger for somebody, and quite honestly, it could be you, to just call 911. And then if the police officer gets there and she's deciding, no, I'm not gonna press any charges, fine. Or if the police officer gets there and they've long gone, you're still safe. I guess I would rather be safe than sorry, especially the town employees, if there appears to be a potential threat of harm.
That's potentially where you can go. You could go, if you have access to one of our buildings, to go in, use your phone, call 911, and so that you're out of harm's way, and, you know, it doesn't mean you couldn't go back out to assist her, but to bring her in and harbor somebody who potentially, she could be the one that's the problem, you know? I'm just thinking, you know, real quickly from the town's perspective that maybe that's a place where we don't fight, we flee, but you certainly could make that call. But to harbor somebody that you don't really know what you're getting into might be, you know, then you can get into hostage, you can get into, you know, all sorts of things, so. So, anyone else in what is next?